racing for 50 years, and I've known Dave for 50 years. And I was thinking about it last night. What stands out that with Dave Lynn so much with me? And I figured it out. I gave him more money over the years in racing than anybody else in the sport. But no, seriously, Dave was a hell of a racer in the late 60s and early 70s. He coupled with an old friend of mine, Tom Dunn, and ravaged the Pro 4 modified division. And he's also been an outstanding entrepreneur in the racing industry, bringing the Goodyear tire to the modified ranks and American racers to the late models and pro stocks. So what can you say? But the biggest word that I can think of when you mention Dave Lynn is successful. And that's Dave Lynn. Ladies and gentlemen, here he is, Dave Lynn.
Oh, I got a lot to say, and kind of bashful to speak in front of people. First of all, I want to thank NERA for all their work that they do. I never realized, how much it went into this, and really hadn't paid much attention, but I sure will now. Second, I'd like to thank Rolly, for putting my name in and getting me on to the committee so that I would have a chance to do this. And his daughter Robin, who actually did all the legwork and provided the input of, my racing career. And there is some other special people that I'd like to thank before I go on, because I'm afraid I might forget. One of them is, a lot of you might know, is Dick Demick. He's not here. He's up in the Pocono Mountains. He's the general manager of Penske Tire and Competition Tire East, Penske Shock. When I started with Goodyear in 1973, they came down with their equipment from Reading, Pennsylvania, helped me set up, and he stood beside me thick and thin through all the years with a modified tour. And without his help and Penske's help, I would have never been successful. There was a lot of people that wanted that Goodyear deal more than me, and a lot more with deeper pockets for sure. But anyway, I was brought up on a farm, big farm, 80-acre farm in Norfolk, Massachusetts. I was born in 1942 during the war. And the farm was pretty well defunct because the hurricane in '38 had tore down the barn. And my dad had to work in the shipyards for he left at 4 or 5 in the morning, got home at dark at night. But we had a great family. I had 2 older brothers, and we had big fields, and they had cars when they were like 13 or 14. So I learned to drive when I was probably 9 years old. So their friends used to come over through the woods, and I'd ride around with them and race. And then at 13 years old, I got my first, we call them woods rods. So we were racing around the fields, and then I guess I was about 12 or 13, and we begged our father. He was not an automotive guy, he was an electrician. And I don't think he could check oil in his truck, but we begged him, and he took us to Norwood Arena. And boy, that just changed my life. I mean, from then on till I went into the service right after high school, I don't think we missed a Saturday night at Norwood Arena. I spent 3 years in the Army, and I got out and I tried my hand. I ran a few street stocks one year. I think maybe I got out in the Army in 1963. I think at 65 I had a street stock at Norwood. I remember I won the feature one night, and they jacked up the car, and both wheels, one wheel, and it wouldn't turn. So I had welded the spider gears together, and they DQ'd me. So, but then fortunately, General Motors in Framingham was putting on a second shift. I was dubbing around working at a gas station, not really doing too much, and I really wanted to race. So I got the job at General Motors, I think it was the beginning of 1965, as a forklift operator. So fortunately, I didn't have to work on the assembly line. I had ran a forklift when I was in the service. And I saved my money, and in '67 I had a back surgery, so they gave me some time off. So I had met Hop Harrington. All of you know the former Hall of Famer, great guy, a real good car builder. Through a mutual friend, and I started, he worked at, he was working with Mike's Truck Stop, and he was basically just working on the race car. The M2, you probably all remember that, at Norwood Arena in Thompson. So I helped him and went to the races with him every Saturday night at Norwood, and then Sundays at Thompson. And I learned a lot from him. He was a great guy and a real good chassis builder. In 1969, I had enough of working in a factory, even though I didn't really do a heck of a lot. And I opened up a little repair shop and started selling passenger tires. And I got some credit from the Goodyear wholesale place locally. I built myself a late model Tiger car, and I raced at Norwood. The first year, 1969, we raced at what they call the late model Tiger. And fortunately, we ran the same big 12-inch M&H slicks that the mods ran. So we used to buy the takeoffs. I remember buying from Johnny Thompson. They'd only run them once, $25. You know, we put tires on a car and could run them for 2 or 3 weeks. So we went. It took me a little while to get going, a little overheating problems and stuff like that. But that first year, between Stafford and Thompson and Norwood, we won seven features. Then I started venturing up to Vermont and Thunder Road and Catamount and Plattsburgh, and actually got over to Senior, Quebec. I ran with Dave Dion and the Dragon Brothers, John Paul Cabana, and I won a couple of races. I think I won at Thunder Road and Catamount maybe once or twice. In the 1971 or 2, Goodyear came out. There was a local Goodyear tire store up there with service in Catamount. And if you didn't put on 4 new Goodyears at about 270 or 80 bucks, you weren't going to finish in the top 5. And I always ran good, always in the money somewhere. And it kind of gave me a wake-up call. So I had, in the meantime, before that, I'd sold some McCreary's. I had met Joe Jacobs, and McCreary just got into the tire business. So I was selling them, and a friend of mine, Buddy Cook, was selling them at Norwood. And I used to take a little trailer behind my ramp truck up to Vermont, and I had 2 or 3 customers, and it was really, helping my tire bill. So anyway, I saw the handwriting on the wall. I couldn't win the way I was racing with the finance, and what racer doesn't want to step behind the wheel and know that he's got a shot at the feature? So I had a good friend that knew the New England district manager of Goodyear, which is located in Needham, Mass. So he set me up an appointment. I sat in his office, we talked. He called Competition Tire, Roger Penske's guy, which was Dick Demick. He was great. We talked. I was already set up with some credit with Goodyear from my little tire and garage in Norfolk. So all of a sudden, things took off at Seekonk, at Star, and I think it was 73 or 74 at the Spring Sizzler. Goodyear mounted their first attempt to get into the modified division, which was great. And so that took off. By 75, 76, I think we had 3/4 of the field. And it went on like that till 1980, 81. New England Drivers and Owners Association was established, being Dick Armstrong and that bunch. And they didn't like they claimed we were having tire races rather than race car races, which was maybe true. If obviously if you had, the modified division was always open competition. If you didn't have, the best tire, they go over to the other truck and get tires from you. So anyway, I was kind of bummed out, and because I knew we weren't going to race modifieds in 1982. I had a few personal problems at the same time. So I decided I was going to I had a retail, meanwhile going through this, I built a retail store in Norfolk about a mile from where I grew up. So I was busy anyway, and I had my weekend guys that worked for me, and they wanted to go to the races, so I kind of stayed home and let them go. Then in the spring of '82, Marvin sues. He sues Hoosier, and he sued the four racetracks were Riverside, Thompson, Stafford, and Seekonk. Well, anyway, right away, Riverside and Thompson dropped out of the lawsuit, so there was two tracks left, and Nedoc and Hoosier. So they had adopted a economy $95 Hoosier 13-inch tire. But the problem with Goodyear and myself was that we didn't have a 13-inch tire, so we had to develop a 13-inch tire. And in the meantime, I'll probably, I think I'll go to my racing and then kind of come back to what happened starting in '82 with the racing, because my racing career was a lot shorter than my tire career. And so in 1982, Tom Dunn, which we were good friends, and he had a NASCAR modified for years, and I'd driven for him once at Seekonk in '73 when he first got into oval track racing. He comes down to my shop in June, and he says, "Dave, I want you to drive my Pro 4, my mini modified," he says. I said, "Well, I don't like mini modified. It sounds like a toy." So anyway, I agree. I says, "Give me a month to get in shape." I was a little overweight, probably drinking a little heavy over this. I was pretty upset about the tire deal, because I really had a love for the modifieds. I mean, I'd become good friends with Richie Evans, Jeff Bodine, and all the top dog guys, because I sold them tires, and I was always there till the end of the races. If guys wanted to bring tires back, we always took them back, and so we were the last ones always to leave the pits. And it's kind of like family to me. So anyway, make a long story short, I says, "I'll be ready in July, Tom." So we start racing the Pro 4 at Westboro. I think we won at Westboro. Then they had that Bandit Series. We went to New Egypt. We won 50-lapper. We won that. Next night we went to Islip, 50-lapper. We won that. A couple of weeks later we went to Shangri-La, ran a 50-lap Can-Am race. We won that. Went to Stafford. They had the Race of Champions for us, 250 lappers. I won the first one. Dave Humphreys won the second one. And then I won the World Series at Thompson. Well, meanwhile, during '82, Richie, Jeff Bodine had gone south. Richie was our guy, and we tire tested. In fact, I was at Shangri-La testing the day that I was supposed to be at New Egypt running the mini mod for Tom, so I had to hustle over there after our testing. So we were pretty successful with the Pro 4, and then in 1983, I won 9 out of 18 features at Westboro Speedway, the track championship and the NEMA championship. We also won races at Thompson. I know we won the World Series again that year. So we moved on, and then Westboro closed in 1985, and that was really a heartbreaker for me. I waited, I worked hard all week, and with the Goodyear tire store, and plus the tire sales, and it just broke my heart when Westboro closed. I just waited from one Saturday night to the next. I waited just to run Westboro Speedway. It was just so much fun. And anyway, we went to Seekonk, and 1985, won a couple races. I bought a rolling chassis of a super late model, a Midwest car was in the Midwest. And I got a Hutter motor from my buddy Richie Evans. And we went and I said, "I'm going to run some of those Budweiser Showdowns." So we went to Stafford, and Dale Earnhardt wins the first one. I come in second. Tim Richmond was third. We get in the second one. Dale and I start in the back, and Tim, and I watch Earnhardt. Somebody wrecked going down the back stretch of Stafford, and all of a sudden, here's Earnhardt. He comes out in about 10th place. So anyway, he won the second one. I think I come in seventh or eighth. A couple of weeks later, we go to Thompson, and Dale's not there. And I won them both. So that was one of my real highlights of my life. And 1986, the spring of 1986, we went down to New Smyrna. We had 6 events scheduled, and I won 3 of them. And then in 1987, we didn't. 86, yeah, we won a couple of races at Seekonk, and I think we won a couple at Thompson. And then the spring of the winter of 87, we went to New Smyrna. Tom had a brand new car, and I couldn't get it around. We threw everything at it, and I couldn't get it around. It wasn't like I forgot how to drive over the winter. So anyway, Leo Cleary, which had driven many times for Tom and his NASCAR modified, I says, Tom, and this was all friendly. I wasn't angry or anything. And I says, Tom, why don't you put Leo in it? I mean, if he can't get this thing around, he'll help you a lot more than I can with his experience. So anyway, Leo drove the car. I drove once more for Tom. I think it was the World Series at Thompson, as Leo was driving Rowley's Pro Stock at the time, and I think they had a commitment, so he asked me to drive. So I drove, and we started 25th. I got up and took the lead, and then we overheated. And that was the last time I drove for Tom. In fact, it was I think 86 was the last time I won a race. I bought in 88, I sold my super late model. In fact, I sold it to Bobby Santos Jr. and my super late model. I didn't want to race that anymore. I bought a Grand National car from Jimmy Spencer. I just wanted to try. They were going to build a brand new super speedway at New Hampshire. So I wanted to try it. So I bought a Grand National car from Jimmy Spencer. I think Ronnie Bouchard came in second in Daytona with that car. It had a Hutter motor in it. So I went down to Rockingham, and I wrecked it. And then I went up to Dover, and I bounced off the wall, had the Darlington stripe at Dover a couple of times. I mean, we're going 165 miles an hour, and I've never been that fast in my life. But anyway, I went to New Hampshire a couple of times, and I didn't like it. I was kind of disappointed. I was looking for a big Thompson or a Dover, and it was a flat track, and I really could never get around flat. I could never get around Seekonk. I went to Oxford a couple of times. I could never get around. I even used to disconnect my 4-barrel to see if I could, feather the throttle a little bit, but I guess my foot was either up or down. So that was basically the end of my racing career, which was great. I'll go back to 1980, 82, and 83, and tire testing with Richie and getting back into the modifieds. And it was a great run. I mean, I tire tested with the greats, Mike Stefanik, Mike McLaughlin, Brett Bodine, the Fuller brothers, Steve Parks, and really enjoyed my life. Eventually, I think it was in the late 80s when I became a McCreary distributor. Commercial Tire went out of business, so they asked me to be the New England distributor. Well, Bob Bear had the NASCAR North and Oxford Plains, and they wanted me to do the rest. And I said, I got to call Goodyear and get their blessings, because Dick Demick, and he had helped me so much through the years. And Dave says, because Goodyear was having their problems, their pricing wasn't compatible to Hoosier, so we were losing short track business. And I called Phil Homer, field director at Goodyear, and he said, yeah, go ahead, Dave. So we got the distributorship for American Racer, and it really went well. At one point, I had probably 75–80% of the business in all of New England. And in 2000, the modified Hoosier came on the scene in the modified heavy around probably 1995, 1996, and they were very competitive. And we tire tested all the time, trying to beat them. And in 2001, NASCAR says we're going to go to a one-tire rule like it's on the rest of our series. And so the Hoosier guys that were on the FOCs, which means freebies, and Goodyear guys, they all complained to NASCAR and said, going to put us, Goodyear and Hoosier, they put a lot of money into this tour. So in the spring, NASCAR changes their mind, and they say, we're going to leave it open for one more year. Well, Goodyear had taken their budget, what I'm assuming is probably between $750,000 and $1 million budget they had between testing and all the scrap tires that they had to throw away if they didn't work, and all the returns that we didn't use at a race. So they had allocated their budget to a different series. So we bowed out, and that was the end of me and Goodyear with a modified tour. And I still had a really good business with the American Racer, but I loved the modifieds, and I made such great friends. Like I said, Richie and I became very good friends, and with among probably all the modified guys. I had so many great experiences, all the races from all the short tracks. I can name on less than one hand anybody that beat me out of a tire, and that's the truth. That's what kind of people racers are. I mean, it might be next year they come over, they need, Dave, I owe you for a set of tires. I says, no problem. You know, they pay it from last year, but great, I was so thrilled. And I don't think there's a lot of people that can say they made their living, and a good living, in a sport that they really loved. And I truly did. And I really had a lot of other great experiences. One time, Richie, I had an old motorhome, and Richie says, I need you to bring one of my cars down to New Smyrna for Speed Weeks. And we always went to New Smyrna Speed Weeks. It was the best racing anybody could get for a $30, $20 ticket back then. They had 30 or 40 super late models from the Midwest, and they had 25, 35 modifieds from New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New England. It was great racing. And that year, it was 79, I believe. Oh, I'm sorry. Anyway, that year Richie won the modified 200, and I was helping in the pit areas. And I want to thank you all for coming, and I'm sorry I got carried away.